Went into the conquest. I spent about a week, 10 days there. And I think it was during that time that they came and shared with my parents and then with me that I had leukemia.
That was at the age of 11?
At the age of 11, there was an occasion, one point where my parents were basically told, we're not sure he's going to survive. Because the type of leukemia I had was so rare and so severe, and actually it was a case of kind of hoping we're going to treat him, but be prepared that this may not end well. It was then that I actually started to question God as to why did that happen? And the question for me was why me? Just remember God almost kind of saying, that's not your question to ask. If I sit in that place of just asking that question, why, what's going to come from that? Will I end up just going further downwards almost, or become consuming? Whereas actually I want to live my life that I've been given back in that respect. End up going off to Bible college, and then ultimately was ordained as a Baptist minister. And so that's kind of the short story really of how I actually kind of took a really challenging and horrible situation and actually going, how do I make some good out of this? And how can I actually use that story and share it with others?
Where's the role of the church at the moment?
It's a really important and a really great question. I think there's...
What do you do to keep yours? Because it seems like lots of people are leaning on you.
Yeah, great question. I think, and it's something that I've thankfully had people around me who've always kind of asked that sort of question, because I think that it's so easy to, in lots of roles, just to burn out.
Hi Ed, welcome to the show today. Thanks
you.
for chatting to me. First of all, just provide some context, I guess, to the conversation today. What do I need to know, first of all?
I suppose probably the main thing would be that I'm the Baptist minister here in Battle. Been here for about 9.5 years, but my life has been full of faith from an early age. So it's very much part of my story in terms of who I am, obviously what I now do.
So tell me a bit about that story. I mean, when did faith first come in, and have there been, talk me through some of the pivotal moments.
I suppose I grew up in a Christian family. So grew up going to church, being part of a church. We were part of a small church in Cornwall, and we met in a local school. So it was kind of like a big family sort of thing. It wasn't some big organisation or part of the established church or that sort of thing. And so grew up going to church. Probably when I was about 6 or 7, there was a moment where I would describe I made a decision to follow Jesus and to believe in him. And then I suppose another key moment would be when I was 9, when I chose to get baptised, which was something that I personally chose and wanted to do. So those are that's my early years, really.
Yeah. And then you moved to Battle, Ashburnham.
Moved to the area.
10-ish, were you?
I was, 10, 11. So my dad, because of his job, so he'd been a self-employed landscape gardener, recession at the end of the 80s, paid to that. And so he got a job as the grounds manager at Ashburnham Place. So we literally kind of packed up and moved as a family. That was December 93.
Okay.
So we moved on the 1st of December, literally drove up in our red Volvo with the play shed on the back of and we got a photo on the back of the trailer sort of thing, and began to settle into life here. Within 3 months or so, the following February, I then became really ill. And initially it was just kind of coming home, feeling a bit off. And actually my parents initially thought it was maybe like growing pains. I was feeling in my legs and that sort of stuff. But then was off school and went to the GPs. And I remember the first time they ever took some blood from me, because I'd never had it before, taking blood. And so they kind of said, just put your arm out. And I was like, okay, this will be fun. Very quickly realised it wasn't. The next day, though, they called up and said, basically, we need to get him into hospital because something's really not right at all, sort of thing. So we went into the conquest. I spent about a week, 10 days there. And I think it was during that time that they came and shared with my parents and then with me that I had leukemia. and basically that's why I was feeling unwell and had deteriorated really quickly as well.
And that was at the age of 11?
At the age of 11, yeah. So massive, and we'd not really settled in. We were actually only just we'd kind of, where we were staying, our house hadn't been quite ready and all these, so life was very much up in the air. I've got two sisters as well. So suddenly I was then whisked up to London with my mum, and so we went to St Bart's Hospital there. My dad then kind of entered a new job still, with my sisters who are both at school, all that sort of thing. And I initially just continued to deteriorate quite quickly. They started me on treatment and that sort of stuff, but there was about a 3-month period where I was just based up in London, receiving treatment and just getting through each day, really. So yeah, it was quite full on.
I mean, as an 11-year-old,
yeah,
that's
yeah,
almost impossible to take in for most people to comprehend.
Totally, yeah. And I think it was something that I'd not really known of anyone being in. I didn't actually even know what leukemia was to start with. I think after a while, initially I thought, well, it's a bit like cancer. Yeah. But then you realise, no, it's actually to do with your blood and all this sort of thing. But no, just completely. And there after a while, it had those moments where you suddenly, people start sending you kind of gifts and all that sort of stuff. And there's those snapshots. So yeah, and maybe it's in hindsight, you look back at that was good. But actually it was, and I lost a lot of weight. I can still remember being in one of the bathrooms, looking in the mirror, and in my head, I was reminded of, at that time, it was the whole thing like the children in Africa. Yeah. And it was almost that, because you could see my ribs and stuff, because I just lost so much weight and was just becoming so weak. They even kind of, at one point, I had like an airbed, basically, because I wasn't able to get out of bed much. And so to stop sores. And so, yeah, really quite extreme, where all you've had in the past is colds and coughs and that sort of stuff.
Yeah. I mean, where was your head at that point?
I think in part it was probably just getting through each day. I can remember, like, getting me to eat anything was a massive thing. I just lost my appetite and and so I can remember, like, one time saying to my mum, I really fancied a burger. And so this is in, if you know that area of London, it's like offices and stuff. So of an evening, it just shuts down. There's nothing. So my mum goes out in, like, kind of, this is March, April, of an evening, out into kind of central London, sort of thing, trying to find, she finds a Burger King, brings me back this burger. She brings it back, and I'm just like, no, I'm not hungry now, sort of thing. So I think actually you're that survival element, and looking back, you realise just kind of how selfish you are, and maybe not realising it, because you're just trying to get through almost. And not knowing what's kind of come really either, because it became your world living in hospital.
And
that whole thing, it's just...
Yeah, I mean, I read later on in your book that you sort of realised your mum kept a diary.
Yeah.
And I guess you said that you were quite sort of selfish. It was all about you just trying to survive.
Yeah.
And you can now look back and probably realise, as a parent yourself, and I'm a parent.
Massively, yeah.
The impact on other people as well.
Yeah, and I think that's something that again, hindsight, so my sisters would come up and visit. So my dad would come up kind of most evenings. He would come up 2 or 3 times a week. At the weekends, my dad would come with my sisters, and that's, and there's again an occasion where they came up and they were having lunch and just bought sandwiches, and I was just like, no, I don't want you to eat in my room. And whether it's because I couldn't annoy the noise or I didn't feel like, but so they had to go elsewhere. And for all that they were going through, my mum was not around. They're settling, and suddenly that whole kind of tension there, and actually not knowing ultimately whether I would come back and come home, which I don't know whether my sisters really realised at that point. But there was an occasion, one point where my parents were basically told, "We're not sure he's going to survive," because the type of leukemia I had was so rare and so severe, and actually it was a case of, we're kind of hoping we're going to treat him, but be prepared that this may not end well. And there were people on the ward who I got to know who didn't survive, or who'd gone through treatment and then came back because they had it, kind of returned. And so it was really upside down sort of existence, really, in terms of what you're going through. And as an 11-year-old in all of this as well.
Yeah.
It's like,
I mean, trying to put that into
Yeah.
context of, what you're going through at that age anyway,
Yeah.
and changes, and you've just moved home.
Yeah.
You're sort of, you're seeing your mum every day, but you're separated from sisters and dad,
Yeah.
and then you're dealing with something that, I mean, did you know that there was a chance?
I didn't at the time, no. Quite wisely, my parents kept that from me.
Yeah.
I think I didn't. I think I knew that things were really bad, or probably I felt really rubbish. And there were points where I did actually. I had a number of lumbar punctures while I was there, which. I talked to people about that, and they're like, "Oh, they're the worst thing ever." Actually, at the time, they were great because they put me under. I'm never sure is it general or local, but the one where you're kind of basically half drunk.
Yeah.
Which, as an 11-year-old, was I really enjoyed that whole experience, and it was really bizarre because I'd start telling jokes, but I'd never finish them. So we're doing this, and they'd like, "Can you finish the joke?" Or every time we had one, I'd ask them what their cars they drove was a random thing, but I keep repeating the same question, but. There were moments where I remember saying to kind of my mum, which again, you think I've said this to my mum, but could they not give me kind of more of that to October, which was the end point of my treatment? So can they just kind of basically knock me out for the next 5-6 months because I can't deal with this? And I think that, again, you then realise actually that's how bad it was. And those dark moments really of just not sure whether we were going to make it through. Was there an end point really?
I mean, it is quite the story. I mean, we started talking about faith, and you're from a faith family. I mean, how did you see that playing out? Was there? I mean, were you questioning things? Were your parents like? Was there ever? That?
I mean, I don't remember at that stage when I was in hospital, kind of questioning it. I mean, I think we had a lot of visitors from kind of the church that we'd settled in Battle who had only just got to literally know us, but were there, and even people from the church in Cornwall came up with it. So there was that kind of connection, that support. I think my dad tells the story of just getting really angry with God, which I think is a really natural thing. I think sometimes we feel we can't basically tell God if we believe in him what we think, but actually I think that's part of it. And my dad tells a story of walking around the woods at Ashburnham and just kind of screaming at the top of his voice to the trees where he was at and that sort of thing. For me, my questions came later.
Okay.
Which again sounds slightly bizarre. So went through the treatment, and because of our faith, we had people praying for me, and through connections actually across the world praying for me. So I very much believe that actually it was kind of the medicine, but actually God actually brought healing to me as well because of the extreme nature of my case and that thing. But it was so when we kind of went through it, came back, I was home and started back at secondary school and all those sorts of things. It was then that I actually started to question God as to why did that happen? And the question for me was why me? As I write about it, it's almost that sense of, as a child, I was fairly well behaved. I stole some sweets from the corner shop a few times, but nothing that in my mind equates to what we'd just gone through. And I think then also when I started to realise the impact it had on my family, again you kind of go, that's not fair either, because it wasn't actually just about me. It had ripples to it. And so for probably about 18 months, 2 years, really kind of chewed over those sorts of questions, but yet at the same time with people going, this is amazing, you're feeling better and you're back and that thing. But actually I can remember I came to a point where there was a camp over at Ashburnham, and it was kind of like a family camp, that thing. And one evening we were in the youth venue, and I remember coming out of it during it, just still with these questions going on, and just walking off, and it was just in that moment I can just remember God almost kind of saying, that's not your question to ask. Which, even saying it now, it kind of sounds a bit stupid or doesn't make sense. But for me, I can only say, I kind of got it. And I kind of go, okay, because if I believe that you're God and created everything and, apart from that, so actually you know where things are going, you know what's going on. And actually it's not for me to ask those questions. Actually, the many things that already at that stage had come out of my experience and our experience that were good, And actually, sometimes we don't have the answers to the big questions in life. And maybe that's my simplistic nature. Sometimes I'm not going to dig on it. But actually, it just sat me and go, okay, I'll run with that.
Yeah, do you think it's almost reframing it from sort of why me to, well, why not me?
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that's it. Yeah, very much so. And I think actually, again, because after I'd kind of been given the all clear I had my treatment, and then they did some final tests, and so I think it was the November time, I got a phone call, and then I had 5 years of kind of checkups, and so you went every month for the first year, every 2 months, and then you were finally signed off, and even over that time. Again, you suddenly realise and get to know more people who are going through it, and are actually going through it for the second or the third time, and actually, yeah, why not? Actually, there's so much going on in the world that and I think also realizing that if I sit in that place of just asking that question, why, for me, what's going to come from that? Will I end up just going further downwards almost, or become consuming? Whereas actually, I want to live my life that I've been given back in that respect.
Do you think humans try and sort of over-rationalize things, and we always like to understand everything?
Yeah, we do. Yeah, definitely.
And there are things that we just can't.
Yeah, no, I think we do. I think, and maybe that's people. We're all wired differently, and so for some people, I want to understand how this works and that sort of thing. But I think sometimes there aren't the things we can't fully grasp, and we've got to be able to just, I think, make peace with that almost, because I think sometimes it can be too much that we're pushing for, and you see those people, it almost drives them to obsession, which I'm not sure is always healthy, really. Yeah.
I mean, how has that experience sort of shaped, I guess, the way that you live your life and the faith and the message that you, and I suppose the work that you do here in Battle? How has that influenced it?
I suppose massively would be the obvious answer. I think one of the things that came out of following that kind of that moment of realization or revelation, whatever you want to call it, I suddenly had that sense of I want to live every day as if it is my last, in response to what I believe God has done for me and given me back, my life, giving me a second chance. And if I tell that to people, I say that's not in the sense of I'm just going to go and I'm going to jump off cliffs and I'm just going to, drink what I want. But actually, how can I, in a right way and not in an all-consuming way, but actually, how can I take each day and how can I make the best of this? And I think it was during that time that I felt what I would describe as a call, but just a sense of actually I want to serve God in the church full time, or not only in the church, but full time for Him. And actually, how can I really give my life? At that stage, you start to think about what you're going to end up doing as a career and all those sorts of things. And so I began just kind of testing some things out as a teenager, really, in terms of what things could look like. End up going off to Bible college, and then ultimately was ordained as a Baptist minister. And so that's kind of the short story, really, of how I actually kind of took a really challenging and horrible situation and actually going, how do I make some good out of this? And how can I actually use that story and share it with others? And so that's now for 21 years now, been a Baptist minister, and not just in the local church, but also spent time with a Christian ministry as well, supporting around the UK kind of different aspects of ministry and that sort of stuff. But actually, seeing the positive in life and how can I actually take something from a very negative situation and turn it around, hopefully.
I guess once you'd sort of finished school and then college and things like that, you had your faith, but then moving into, like you say, what am I going to do for work? What's the future look for me? Because there's lots of people who have faith, but
totally.
they come along on a Sunday, but was this a conscious decision by you, or do you feel it was sort of like this was God's sort of mission for you, or was it a bit of both?
Both.
You had to accept it as well.
I think a bit of both, because I think I would believe that God has purposes for us. I think the idea that we have a set plan and basically God wants you to do this, that, and the other, and then if you deviate from it, He's gonna kind of squash you. That kind of imagery. I think God sets us on a path, and He's created us with free will, though. So how we choose that and use that and shape it. So I very much believe it's the purpose that God has for me. But at the same time, He wanted me to shape it and explore it and actually be me in it as well. I love creativity in lots of different ways. And so that's something that I've always sought to draw into what I do because I think that's part of who I am. And so I think God wants us to be who He's created us to be wherever we find ourselves.
It's often said that, when there are tough times, I mean, obviously you had an incredibly tough time as a teenager, but whether people are going through struggles at work, in family life, money, the world can be stressful.
Yeah.
That people often say, would go back to your purpose. Is purpose and faith, are they similar or completely different, or is what?
I think they could be. They're probably very, very similar in many ways. I think the concern, I suppose, I would have is sometimes if you feel like you've just got one purpose, and that's the line. But I think, that real sense of basically what difference am I going to make is probably the question that I ask, which I think anyone, whether they have a faith or not, and in whoever it might be, I think the sense of how can I actually be a force for good in the world. Part of my sense in that is actually wanting to share something of what I've discovered and what I believe, and wanting to kind of give people that opportunity to explore it. If they choose not to, then that's fine. But I think, that purpose, and I think it's important sometimes, maybe if people go, actually, what is my purpose? Am I just meandering through life? But that doesn't mean you've got to become a vicar or work in a church, because again, there's that danger that almost like, some might say, well, I've obviously on a higher level, really. Whereas actually, I don't think I'm any different in terms of the choices I've made. I've just gone down this path, whereas someone else might actually... I mean, my dad's been a gardener all his life, and I think that's just as valuable and important to what I've done. It's just they're different avenues, really.
I mean, your work within Battle, obviously you're here at the Baptist Church, but you have connected with some of the other churches as well, and they do work together.
Yeah.
Where do you see the role of the church currently? Because, I mean, you look at national statistics, and actually, I don't know what it was, but at the last census, had dropped the amount of people who say that they have a sort of Christian faith. So where's the role of the church at the moment?
It's a really, really important and a really great question. I think there's a piece of research done not long ago called The Quiet Revival, talking about, and I don't know the percentages, but basically kind of certainly younger people have less kind of faith in or belief in the church and value in the church, but in terms of faith, actually, there might be more to it, sort of thing. And I think that's where sometimes the established church, and I would use the Baptists within that, not wanting to point fingers at others, I think sometimes the things, and certainly the stuff comes out in the media, actually just the trust isn't there, or it can seem very kind of it's something for history, really. It's something that happened, or maybe that's quite negative, actually, what's gone on in history and that sort of thing. I think the place of the church, though, you look at a lot of what the church has done in terms of society, in terms of kind of, the number of toddler groups kind of that run through, currently, in terms of the whole involvement in kind of bigger things like the slave trade and school and all. There's so many, but I think even bringing it to present day, actually, I think a lot of churches and what we seek to do, actually, how can we be a blessing to this community, and how can we be connecting in, so earning the right as well to have a voice, rather than just me saying, well, as the church, you've got to listen to me whether you like it or not. Actually, how do we build those relationships? And I think, how do we get away from you've just got to come to our building and come to what we do, but how will we actually engage with what is going on there? And that's what I love about being in Battle, because it's a smaller community. Actually, you're able to connect into a lot of different things that go on throughout the year. And actually, how can we just support that and be a part of that? I mean, our running club is a massive example of that. In terms of actually getting involved, like with the 10K or those sorts of things. And actually, we stop our Sunday morning meeting and we say, you don't have to run, but go along and support it, because that's part of what Battle is, and we want to be a part of that. And we're not there handing out flyers or anything like that. We're just there because I think we want to build those relationships so that we can then support people at their times of need or times of challenge, as and when they want that as well. Because I think it's how do we create those open doors so that the people can come and find us when they need us, almost.
Yeah, it is. It is being approachable, I guess, in those times,
it,
because
yeah.
very often, we have birth, marriage, death.
That's it,
You know,
yeah.
and the church is maybe involved in those, but
yeah.
not so much outside. So it's just being there.
Yeah.
So that when
Yeah.
people are, and that the church does step up in times of need.
That's it. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I think there's that instant rallying of people going, actually, how can we support? And often, if someone is bereaved in the church, then naturally people rally round and will offer that help. And I think it's how can we connect with others so we're aware of what's going on. I mean, with my role as chaplain to Battletown FC, we use the phrase of being pastorally proactive, spiritually reactive. So how can we? My role is there to be pastorally caring and supporting, making myself available. If one of the players or a supporter or a manager kind of said, Ed, I want to chat to you about your faith, or I've got this question, then great, I'm there. But I'm not there on the touchline each week talking to the manager going, so when did you last go to church? Or what do you think about God? Or that sort of thing. And I think that's a really helpful kind of framework for me. But I encourage the church as well, actually. How is their balance? So we're hopefully approachable. And when those opportunities, if they do come, we'll respond to them, but not pushing it on people. Because I think that's partly where maybe some of the distrust has come for church as well, because it seems like it's almost too heavy-handed, rather than actually you going at your own pace of exploration and that sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, I love that. I love the way being involved in the town football club, and if Battle Baptist sort of set the football club up.
Yeah.
And again, just being involved in the community and being there to, I guess, provide an ear, provide a shoulder during those tough times, and that can lead into faith as
very much
well.
So. Yeah.
But certainly with people's, there's lots of talk around mental health and things like that, and actually, I suppose some of that taps into that.
Very much so. Yeah. I mean, we have. We run on a Wednesday morning something called Renew 1066, which is a kind of a cafe space. And the whole idea is it's part of a national charity where it's okay to be not okay. And it's just, and they have kind of jigsaws, or you can bring a hobby, or they might play the odd game, and that's it. But it's just a space where the idea is it's like a shared front room is the kind of concept. But it's and there is a point. Kind of, we do it halfway through it where if you want to pray, there is a prayer space, but you don't have to. And if you never go to it, that's absolutely fine. And we will promote things that are going on in the life of the church beyond it. But at the same time, it's actually going, no, this is just that space. And I think, how do we support people where they're at? And if and when they want to explore more, great. But if they don't, we still want to support them. And you can keep coming, forever almost, without actually taking it further in terms of your faith journey. Because again, that's that genuineness of actually we want to just care for and support people wherever they're at.
Is the church sort of starting to take that role as sort of like the village, from the fact of, now certainly people are much more isolated, we know many more people living alone, feeling disconnected, and actually it's just known, whether it's a faith or just anything, just being involved in a group. Is actually good. And,
definitely.
And you're there to provide, I guess, the space that people can come and be in that group.
Totally. And I think actually just finding those interests that you have or things that connect and ways that you can just be together with other people, because I think there's so much good just comes out of that. And again, I think with the whole off the back of the pandemic and people working from home more or that challenges as well, you can go sometimes, a few days or even a week. I know people who maybe won't connect. And certainly an example from the Renew 1066 model is there was a lady who went to a group up north, and she said, I used to come along because it was the only place each week that someone would say hello and say my name. And you kind of go, if that's where people are at, it doesn't take much to just offer a welcome and connect in and that sort of thing. So no, totally.
And what do you do to keep yours? Because it seems like lots of people are leaning on you.
Yeah.
You're here
Yeah.
running the service unit. You're here as the head of the church here.
Yeah.
But for you, what's your escape?
Yeah, great question. I think, and it's something that I've thankfully had people around me who've always kind of asked that sort of question, because I think that it's so easy to, in lots of roles, just to burn out. And actually finding those points, I think, I mean, for me, I love to run. I have done for many years, and there's nothing I find quite like. So if you have a not a stressful day, or if you have like a full on day, so it's not negative, but just your head's full. Actually, my wife Emma, she'll often say, just go out for a run, and I love that. Actually, within 5 minutes, I can be in fields and paths, living here, and actually just have that headspace. I go back to my creativity. I love making things out of wood. So when I was 5, I was given a workbench, which I had in my bedroom. My parents are great. Literally like with a proper saw and hammer. I mean, never do it these days. So I've got a workshop. And actually that's something, again, that I just love. And just for the sake of it as well. Just creating, making stuff. And I suppose reading is the other thing. Just trying to find, but I think it's whatever it is for you. It's finding something that you can just switch off in. I know for running, a lot of people that would be their worst nightmare, and they'd kind of go, "Why? How is that?" And to relieve stress. But finding those sorts of things, I think, is so key. And actually, also, I mean, we were talking earlier beforehand about kids, our kids and families. And that's I think recognizing the time of life you're in as well is something that I'm still learning, but actually, as my 3 grow up and are old, actually, I've got more time, or I've got different time, and so how do I lean into that and recognise maybe this worked 5 years ago, but actually it doesn't anymore. So how do I reshape it, or how do I look at it afresh? And something I try and do kind of on an annual basis is ask that question. So what are those things on a daily, weekly, monthly, and a seasonal basis that are going to refill and refresh me? And not just from a faith point of view, although that's part of it, but actually just generally. And how are those things kind of, am I making sure they're in my diary ahead of time, rather than, I really wish I'd made time for that. And having that review and that refresh, I think, is key.
You mentioned running there. I mean, we've got to talk about it. So you've run the London Marathon.
I have indeed, yeah.
And that, in fact, if anyone's listening to this, you think back to those age 11, 12, 13, and then how old were you when you ran the?
I was 38.
38.
Yeah.
I mean,
it's, yeah.
You couldn't get out of bed at one point.
No.
And then you've done a challenge that isn't just going for a run.
No.
It's a tough one.
And actually, it was what was really wonderful. So I'd applied to the ballot for the London Marathon a number of times, and I'd kind of said to the family, I've given up. I think I've done a couple of other marathons. I think my marathon days are over. I'm not so, and I'd forgotten that I'd actually put the ballot. I'd filled in the ballot still once more. So I suddenly got this kind of offer, obviously, to go in, sort of thing. But it coincided with it being 25 years since I'd been given the all clear for having had leukemia. So actually, this is a great opportunity. I was able to raise money for Bloodwise, the cancer charity, but without kind of that pressure of I've got to raise it. I could just whatever, I could. And so that was wonderful. But also it was actually such a marker going, 25 years ago, I'd have never done this. And there's a video, so I mean, I've finished it, came through the finish line and took a picture and got someone to take a picture. And I just had my phone and I just filmed a little video, and in it, I mean, I just become a blubbering wreck. But that sense, and as I'm saying, I realised actually, 25 years ago, I was in London, and actually, it was in April, so it was that sort of time. My parents were being told, "Don't expect him to survive," basically, and I've just run 26 whatever miles, nearly killed myself. But what an achievement! And again, I think it caused me to then kind of write about it, actually going, these are so many different things that have come out of what was a horrible moment and a horrible experience, and I wouldn't wish on anyone. But actually, again, how can we, in our own time and space, actually, how can we see the good coming out of situations? Because, that's not to say you've always got to find it, but actually, how do we, turn things around? How can we seek to have that positive outlook? And how can we actually, even if horrible stuff happens, look to build beyond it almost, and not let it define us in a negative way. I suppose that's the heart of it, really.
Yeah, using that to adjust whatever
Yeah.
it is and using it as a lesson. You know, I mean, it's often said whether you've got faith or not, that sometimes these things are sent to test us and things like that. And you know, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger.
No,
I mean, they're all these same things. So however you're coming from it, actually, why you'd never wish it upon someone or want to go through it again, accepting that this has probably shaped the way I've gone.
Yeah, there's so much that I look back on now, and I look back to kind of that time and those few months really in London, but actually have impacted across my my life and what I do, even ultimately what I do now and along the way as well.
Ed, thank you so much for chatting to me today. You know, it's been a great conversation. Yeah, just to finish off, what's next for you? I mean, you're staying in battle for a bit and continue doing some work, or
I think we've always we've always looked to move on when we feel it, basically God kind of gives us a new opportunity. So we never look to move. I think obviously my wife Emma is now an ordained minister as well. So we work together in the church here, which is something we love to do. I know talking to some people, the idea of working with your spouse is not, but for the record, we get on really well and really enjoy it. So I think really wanting to, and it very much in terms about actually developing those kind of community engagements. I say we've been here almost 10 years and actually we've just started to scratch the surface. And I think those opportunities that we have to make an impact for good in this community, I think is what we want to see.
Thank you so much. And keep going at it.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of the Balanced Ambition podcast. I genuinely hope the stories inspire you as much as they inspire me. If you found value in today's conversation, please share it with a friend. And remember, by subscribing, you won't miss an episode, and it would truly mean the world to me. Stay balanced, and I'll see you next time.